Good morning, everyone, and welcome. It's FBC Radio Live. It is Thursday, October 13th, 2022, and we are just steamrolling, so to speak, into Thursday Night Football. Unfortunately, that steamroll is going to end with us landing in some very thick mud that's going to slow down the momentum because we have the Washington Commanders and the Bears tonight on Thursday Night Football. And, in theory, any football is good football. But based on some of the offensive metrics someone posted on Twitter recently, the Bears are literally running a 1970s offense. Like, it's not, it's kind of like, no, it is a 1970s offense. And it'll be interesting to see kind of what what they bring to the table against the Commanders tonight.
We're going to have to see if they can crack 2,000 yards passing this year. We know the Bears have never had a 4,000-yard passer in their illustrious history. Well, we'll see if Justin Fields can crack 2,000 yards passing this year, because that's what he's on pace for. And you can just tell from the promos, Ian, normally when you have a game coming up on Thursday or Sunday night, it's, Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers host Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers. The promo tonight is Washington, Chicago, two franchises known for tough defenses. It's like, oh, okay, can't wait for that.
Yeah, it's like the marketing department couldn't even figure out a way to market these two quarterbacks. And look, I think, Carson Wentz, I think it's weird because I think he gets unfairly criticized, but he deserves credit. You know what I mean? Like, I think he has very good moments and he has very bad moments, and I think being quote unquote called out by the by Ron Rivera, so to speak. I don't know. I mean, I think Washington, they have more problems than just their quarterback. So I feel like that was a little too harsh and a little bit too, I guess, undeserving to kind of have to take the weight of a franchise that I think is still kind of, lost in trying to find out who they are. And I don't want to try to sound so deep here, but we said before the season, and we've said it for a long time, like, their issues stem from the top down. Until they figure out what they're going to do at the ownership position, I don't think this team is ever going to really truly find their way. And look, I mean, let's face it, going through and like Carson Wentz, nice player, not an answer at quarterback, I think, and we've seen that over the last handful of years. It's just, for whatever reason, it just hasn't played out for him. It hasn't worked out for him. And look, I mean, he's going to have some great moments. He's going to play very well at times. He's going to sit there and remind you why he was a high draft pick, but that's not what you're seeing regularly and on, a consistent basis. It's certainly not on enough consistency to win a lot of football games. So, I mean, again, this is what I hope for on games like this. I hope it's entertainingly bad. And I don't mean bad football, because look, these are all professionals, but I want to see some things we haven't seen before. And no, I'm not talking about Patrick Mahomes. Okay. I'm talking about like outrageously, like, make a football follies type video type stuff. That's what I want to see. I want to see some outrageous play call decisions. I want to see some just out of the box thinking when it comes to situational football. That's what I want from tonight, because I feel like that will at least give us a very entertaining football game. Because I'm not going to lie, John, I'm kind of a little low on the optimism here.
Yeah, I mean, we had that last Thursday, right, with Denver, Indianapolis, where it went from being a game you couldn't watch to a game that you keep watching because Lord knows how it was going to end. In terms of Carson Wentz, he's one of those guys that, like, 80% of the time, he looks like an elite NFL quarterback. The problem is the other 20% of the time, he's throwing interceptions, he's making bad decisions, he's running into sacks. It just goes completely haywire for him, and that's not good enough. And look, if Washington continues to stumble, and look, they're in a tough division with the Giants, Eagles, and Cowboys all playing splendid football, maybe they get the first pick in the draft. C.J. Stroud, the quarterback from Ohio State, is supposed to be the first overall pick. Maybe they pick him, and Carson Wentz is playing for his fourth team in 4 years.
I don't think they're bad enough, though. That's the problem. That's what I'm saying. Like, I think Washington has, like, they're they're kind of in that purgatory, so to speak, where it's like they're too good to get that top overall pick. And let's face it, John. I mean, having the top overall pick is overrated, anyways. Look, I mean,
Mhm.
Carson Wentz and Jared Goff are on one's on the second team, the other's on his third team.
Right.
Josh Rosen, we know Josh Rosen.
Yeah, don't bring him up. I thought he was the best quarterback in
Yeah,
that
well,
draft. So
I think a
stop
lot.
listening to me.
Well, I certainly when you pick the Browns,
I
you go to
should
the
have
Super
said
Bowl.
Josh Allen. I should have said Josh
Well,
Allen. I said Josh
they get
Rosen.
mixed
I
up.
just
So
got confused.
you got confused. I mean, sometimes you
I
don't.
do that from
Yeah,
time to time. I'm almost 60. You know,
yeah,
I picked the Browns to go to the Super Bowl last year instead of the Bengals.
right,
Same state,
right.
wrong team.
Yeah, yeah. I'll go with that. I'll give you a little bit of credit, I guess. I suppose.
Thank you.
But yeah, I mean, so I think having the top overall pick is a little overrated. I think again, there's no sure thing here, so that's why I never really believed in tanking, because it's like tanking doesn't guarantee you anything, and you can still screw it up, and you can still, there's a lot of variables that go into whether or not a draft pick's going to pan out or whatever. So for me, I think this Washington team is too good to be a top, bottom, top of the draft type picking team. But obviously, I don't think they're good enough to compete for six. So they're gonna fall into probably that like 8 to 15 range draft pick. You know what I mean? Like that ballpark is how I see it. And look, you can obviously get a really good player in that sense. I just don't think whatever issues they have, they're never going to get completely resolved until they resolve what's going on in the front office and the ownership. And that's just how I feel about it. So until then, you're going to get the same old Washington football.
They almost feel like an expansion team, don't they? At this point, even their uniforms
Well, they've
are like
changed names like 3 times. It might as well be an
right.
expansion team.
Yeah, we'll see who's going to change names. You know, is Carson Wentz going to be on his fourth team, or the Commanders going to have their third team name by next year? Because I'm not really sold on Commanders. And look, if someone comes in and buys that franchise, which there's rumors out there, they're probably going to want to change the name too to get the stink off of Daniel Snyder, right?
No, well, I don't know, because I feel like that's more work than it would be worth it, and I don't know if there's really a stink on the Commander's name outside of the way they play sometimes, because I think again it's and that's the thing with these NFL franchises. Like Snyder didn't like create the Redskins, you know what I mean? Like he didn't create the franchise.
Right.
He's there's not that distinction to it, so you can separate ownership from the shield, so to speak, the Washington shield in this situation. And I know obviously, he has, a hand in creating the name, but at the same time, I think it was a very public thing. So it wasn't just him behind a closed door saying this is who we're going to be. It was a very public campaigning, so to speak. So I think, and I do think there's a lot of Washington fans that want to see him gone, and rightfully so. And I think that's the only way that this franchise can truly turn itself around. And then you can focus on getting the right players, because like I said, as nice as Carson Wentz is, I'm sorry, he's not going to win a Super Bowl. He's not going to win playoff games for you. He's going to give you nice moments throughout the season. Maybe one year you put it all together and have a great regular season record, but then you're out in the divisional round. I mean, really, that's how I look at Washington. Mainly, well, again, ownership aside, their issues, I think, are they have a good quarterback. They do not have a great quarterback. And without a great quarterback, you can't win in this league.
The Washington football team, the Washington Commanders, whatever you want to call them, have not played in the NFC Championship game since 1991. The 1991 NFC Championship game was Washington-Detroit. Neither team has come even remotely close to getting back to that high level. Well, I mean, we talk about Dallas the last 25 years. They haven't been to an NFC Championship game since 1995, but they at least have stayed somewhat relevant. Obviously, they've been the biggest brand in football, and they do make the playoffs probably once every 2 or 3 years, and are still a team that everybody likes to watch. Washington has fallen into irrelevance. And I'll be honest with you, Ian, in the 70s, 80s, even early 90s, that was a marquee franchise. That was a franchise that the biggest rivalry in football for a period of time was Washington-Dallas. That was the biggest rivalry in the sport, and now they're just kind of irrelevant.
Yeah, and look, I mean, go back. You had Joe Gibbs, you had Doug Williams, you
Yep.
had all these players that came and created this team. And look, you have good players on this team now. But as we know, it doesn't matter how many great players you have all across the board if you don't have a good enough quarterback and if you have organizational dysfunction, you're never going to be a successful franchise. I mean, it
Yep.
is what it is. As many we talk about all these different variables, all these different positions and schemes and this and that. It really comes down to that ownership and your best player at the most important position, and that's quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, obviously coaching, you don't want to have an incompetent coach, Brandon Staley. So that can also be an issue. I think Ron Rivera is a good coach. I don't think he's a bad coach. I don't think he's a Hall of Fame, you know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
change of franchise type coach. But I think Washington's biggest issues obviously reside in the front office, ownership, and then at quarterback. And that's again, this isn't piling on Carson Wentz. I just don't believe Carson Wentz is good enough to overcome the other obstacles this franchise has and everything like that. So I guess real quick, who do you got winning this game? You have to.
Chicago's at home. Yeah, I know. Can this be
Does
yet another game that we pick for a tie? Well, yeah, I mean, Chicago's 2-3. Chicago's been competitive though, right? They were close to the Giants. They played Minnesota tough. The Green Bay handled them easily, like they normally do. But they've at least been in the games. Washington's also been in like some screwy games. I mean, they had a chance to beat Tennessee last week, right? They had 3rd and goal from the 2, down 4 late in the game, and Carson Wentz throws an interception, which you just can't do in that situation. At least keep a chance for your team to get one more play out there. I'll go with Chicago. They're at home. But yeah, this could be another game that ends in a tie. If this thing goes to overtime like last Thursday's game, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, I know, right? Geez, think about this: we get Thursday night and we bookend this weekend with another Broncos primetime game on Monday Night Football.
Boy,
but and look, I'm actually gonna take Washington, and I have nothing other to add than I had to pick a team, so I picked one, and it just happened to pick Washington. So, but the good thing is we do have a 4:00 game that, by every bit of reasoning, probably should have been a primetime game. But Buffalo and Kansas City going head to head, and this is a nice little, I guess, transition into us talking about that game, and of course, the MVP race, which is starting to, I guess, become a little bit clearer heading into this week. And this is based off Caesar's Sportsbook. Josh Allen plus 200, Patrick Mahomes plus 450 as the two favorites. Jalen Hurts plus 500, Lamar Jackson plus 600, and Justin Herbert still in there plus 1600. So very noticeably, the old guys are not in the mix. The first old guy, Brady, plus 3,000, which again, that's it's going to take a lot of work, but surprisingly, I wouldn't mind those odds, throwing a little extra cash on Tom just in case. But even though I don't feel like it's possible at this point. Any surprise there? I mean, Josh Allen, I do feel like is kind of it's kind of, I don't want to say separating himself from the group, but I do think he's when I say clear favorite, I don't mean by like a wide margin, but I do think when we go through the prime candidates, I think he clearly sticks out a little bit. Agree or disagree?
I agree with you because it's his award to lose. He was the favorite going into the season. What exactly has he done to hurt himself? I mean, they're 4-1. They've dominated in their wins. They had a great comeback win against Baltimore on the road. Their one loss, he still threw for well over 400 yards. So it's not like he didn't show up that day. It was just a kind of a weird game that they lost the Dolphins to. So he, I think, is clearly the favorite. Mahomes is right up there. His team is also 4-1. I think Lamar Jackson's having a great year, but they blew 2 games that they probably should have won. They would have been 5-0 at this point, maybe the best team in football. Jalen Hurts is doing a great job in Philadelphia. He doesn't have the touchdown passes, though, I think, to be a real contender for this.
Yeah.
I believe he only has 6 touchdown passes, which would mean he throws
really
like 20
last year.
Well, he's still at 38. I mean, 38 more than Jalen Hurts is probably going to get 22 this year at the pace he's at. And again, he's run in for 4 touchdowns, so he's got 10 touchdowns He's playing at a very high level. Herbert, I love, but again, I wouldn't quite put him up there so far in terms of production. The guy that I think is being left off is not a quarterback. And again, this is a quarterback's award. I get it. But I think Micah Parsons deserves some credit for what Dallas is doing. They're winning on defense. Yeah. They're 4-1 with a backup quarterback who, other than, Cooper Rush's parents and Skip Bayless, no one really knows much about or loves. But they're 4-1, and they've had some nice wins as well. Look, he's a menace. He's the best defensive player in football right now. Because of his ability to go forward, sideways, and back. That's something that Aaron Donald can only do 2 of those 3 things, unless they decide to have Aaron Donald cover in the secondary, which the way the Rams have played, maybe they may have to do that. But I think Micah Parsons deserves some credit and some love in the MVP race as well. He's the best defensive player in football, and that team's winning because of their defense.
No, that's a great point. And unfortunately, that momentum would never build until later in the season. Because you would have to, from his standpoint, he would have to essentially break like a sack record. And even though look, sack numbers aren't, again, sack totals are a bit overrated because I agree. It's a flashy stat that it's easy to kind of really it's like home runs. I'm not saying home runs are overrated, but in the sense that it's a big time stat. But the reality of it is, that's what's going to need to happen for him to get that recognition. I mean, he could have all the quarterback pressures in the world. He could have all these other great stats that really epitomize all the things that he does. But if he doesn't have the sack numbers and the Cowboys aren't, 14-3 and maybe competing for that 1 seed or claiming that 1 seed, he's not even going to get a sniff. But I agree with you. I think that's a great point that, he's truly – not just on reputation. Like Aaron Donald, they'd always mention him in the MVP race because he was just a really great player. And I'm like, okay, I get it. But like, you know what I mean? That's not enough for me to sit there and say, that he's doing more than quarterback. Because at the end of the day, I don't care how good your defensive lineman is. If you don't have a good quarterback, you're not winning games, which tells me, guess what? What's more valuable to your team's wins or losses? Well, the quarterback position and how good they are. So in this situation, though, you're right. I mean, you lose your starting quarterback. Everyone expects you to not win any games. All of a sudden, you're winning games. And quite frankly, everyone knows Micah Parsons is coming, and they still can't stop it. So I like that. I like that train of thought, although I'm right there with you. I don't think there's even a chance, a slight chance that he even gets mentioned in this. And look, a lot of it, again, it is a quarterback's league. It's a quarterback's award, and it's not unfair. It's the reality of the situation. We all agree that it's the most important position. So inherently, it's also going to be the most valuable. So, that's why the MVP is often given to a quarterback. And look, I mean, I don't agree. I don't disagree with the top 2 there. I gave my kind of theory on how this works. Like those guys, like, and you mentioned that Josh Allen was getting the hype going into the season, and this award, especially nowadays, becomes partly about campaigning, not from the player, but on behalf of the player from various media members or what have you. Whether it's before the season or during the season, it's about hype. So narrative goes into it and plays a much bigger role than I think it probably should, John, than, taking yourself out of it and looking at the race in a vacuum. Forget about the people involved. You know what I mean? Just think about the race in a vacuum. In which case, like I said, I think more people would be in this race right now. Right now, though, it feels like it's just Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen. And it probably should be more.
Oh, absolutely. Has Lamar Jackson not done more for his team, or at least as much for his team as Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen? And look, if they don't blow those 2 games, and they really blew those games, especially the Miami game, you're up 21 points in the fourth quarter. You can't lose that game. And they had a 20-3 lead over Buffalo in that matchup. And again, they go for it on 4th and goal from the 2, and he throws an interception. Anything but that. Now you leave Buffalo at their own 2. That's different than their own 20. So that's on Lamar Jackson. I get that. But those guys have all really done a great job. And whatever Jalen Hurts is doing in Philadelphia, kind of playing the position a little bit differently in terms of he's not throwing a lot of touchdown passes, but he's throwing the ball really well and getting his team down there. But they have a really good running attack. And they're more of a traditional team. Like when they get inside the 5, they run the thing in. So we can't punish him because they're doing it that way. I mean, he's not getting cheap touchdown passes like a lot of other guys get, or quite frankly, most quarterbacks get. But yeah, I mean, look, it could come down, or at least the early lead in this, because we're about a third of the way through the season. It could come down to Sunday, Mahomes, Allen, 425 in Kansas City. Whoever wins that game has the inside track to be the number one seed in the AFC. That's how big that game is.
And that's exactly part of the narrative aspect going into these races, because look, I mean, you brought up touchdown, and I'm not going to sit here and criticize. I mean, a touchdown is a touchdown, but look, if you're going to sit there and, Patrick Mahomes has 15 touchdowns, I'm like, oh, okay, well, I mean, how many? Again, I think he had. I saw the stats yesterday. I think he has a large percentage of them have come within the 5 or 6 yard line. Okay, all right, whatever. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Just, I think Josh Allen has played better. I think Patrick Mahomes has played really great this season. Just, I think Josh Allen has been better. And look, going again, I could, in a way, make an argument, say, again, if this was more or less about, looking at the award and the impact in a vacuum and not necessarily any sort of outside influence, then, like I said, a couple more players would be in this race legitimately, in my opinion. And let me ask you, John, how many wins do you think Tampa Bay has if Tom Brady's not their quarterback right now?
Maybe one.
Yeah. And maybe that's the Falcons, but even then, I don't know.
Yeah, they were up 21-0, but he kind of got them to 21-0. And look, they can't run the football. Their receivers are all banged up. Their defense has been a disappointment. Their offensive line is all banged up. Maybe one.
He's very quietly thrown. And I was actually almost kind of shocked when I saw this. Very quietly, he's third in the league in passing yards. Again, we're talking about everyone around him is 26 and under. And then there's this old guy right in the middle, smack dab in the middle of the top 5. And, that's more passing yards than Patrick Mahomes. I think Josh Allen is leading it. I believe Jalen Hurts is number 2. I had that piece of paper in front of me. Unfortunately, I kind of misplaced it because I'm an absolute organized mess. Unorganized mess. Whatever. I was much better at making up words on Tuesday. Today, not so much. But
it's the day off. The day off does that.
Kind of screwed me up a little bit, And just anticipating tonight's game has put my brain in a fog. So
I can't wait. I mean, we've got 11 hours left before that amazing kickoff between the Bears and Commanders.
I'm just going to watch the Bruins game over again from last night. Big win last night over the Capitals.
I'm going to watch Super Bowl 45. Packers 31. Steelers 26.
Right.
That's where I'm going, or whatever the final score was. I almost forgot.
Yeah, well, it was so long ago, John.
Yeah, it was. I know. Rub it in.
Look, I'm just saying. I've forgotten things too that were a long time ago.
We'll always have Dallas, is the way I would phrase that.
Right. So yeah, I mean, look, I'm not going to argue with the odds makers and who the top 2 MVP candidates are. I mean, I really can't. I mean, obviously, I do believe Josh Allen. I do believe Josh Allen is still the should be the front runner. And you're right. I mean, a lot of it is probably going to come down to this game. And as crazy as it sounds, because it's only week 6. But, I'm not going to sit here and completely close the door on, the rest of these candidates, guys like Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts, because, look, we've seen Kansas City be a little vulnerable. And it's like, yeah, it's great. They fell down 17-0 to the Raiders and came back. But like I said to you the other day, it's like, was anyone there sitting thinking the Raiders were going to do what they needed to do to win this game? No. They're just like, all right. It's like, and I know your guy, Nick Wright, got really excited about, and I love these really weird cherry pick stats. Like when the team scores the first 17 points, Patrick Mahomes is this, that, and the other. I'm like, I don't care about that. You know what I mean? Especially when you're only down 17 points, 5 minutes into the second quarter. In this day and age, those type of leads are really starting to evaporate. Actually, it's something I'd be curious to see kind of the study on that, because maybe it's a perception thing and maybe the reality isn't quite like that, John. And I talk about that all the time. Perception isn't always, what the actual reality of the situation is. But I feel like in based on how offense and how much of an advantage offenses have nowadays. I feel like that lead, that 17-point lead, isn't as strong as it once was. Does that make sense? Like I feel like teams
Oh
are
no,
far more capable of overcoming those big deficits, and we're seeing more and more of it recently.
No different than basketball, Ian. You know, a 12-point lead early in the fourth quarter is not the same as what it was, you know, even 15 years ago. 12-point lead 15 years ago in the NBA when scoring was down, it was pretty much game over. Now with the immense three-point shooting that these teams have, like if you're up 15 against Golden State early in the fourth quarter with Steph Curry, you know how quick that lead can evaporate? Like in 4 minutes. And I'm not being hyperbolic there.
I watched the NBA Finals, John. Like, trust me, you don't have to remind me.
Well, the Celtics, I mean, I know that the first 5 minutes of an NBA game is at some point useless, but the Celtics got off to like a 14-2 start in that game, in game 6. So I'm like, okay, this is great. We're going to see game 7 in San Francisco in a couple days. And then the Warriors went on like a 21-0 run. I'm like, oh, I guess the season's over. So maybe not that much, but football, teams come from behind all the time. My point with that is always don't get down 17-0. I mean, you had the ball several times to do something with it. You know, getting down 17-0 is great to come back from that. And look, my guy doesn't do that very often. Rodgers is not a comeback guy. He's not. He's more of a front runner. And even when you're talking about all these short touchdown passes that Mahomes has, I'd gladly like those because Green Bay struggles in the red zone. So, you know, however way you get in the end zone is good.
Oh, no,
but I mean, it's a pretty cool stat without question. But do you know who has the most come from behind wins in the NFL since 2014?
Like Matt Stafford.
Matt Stafford and Derek Carr are tied for that. And so, I mean, are they the two best quarterbacks in football? You know, no.
No, and look, I don't think anyone in this, you know, that's obviously the problem with everyone always will pinpoint one stat or the other. And it's like, no, it's about the collection of them. And no one's believing Derek Carr and Matt Stafford. Trust me, far from it, actually. We kind of campaign against both of those quarterbacks a bit, especially Matt Stafford. And we're seeing that a bit.
Can I add one more thing about the MVP race? I like to really dive deep into this, and I just try to be a contrarian and say, can you find someone besides a quarterback? And I know it's nearly impossible. I remember, I think about 7 years ago, I was campaigning for Tyron Smith being the MVP of the league. The Cowboys were really good, and no one ever touched Dak Prescott. And, you know, Zeke Elliott was running to the left, and like I could have run for 5 yards of carry. Like, this guy just makes that team really awesome. Of course, it's idiotic to go there. The left tackle is going to win the MVP. But I'm not going to pick a left tackle this year. Can you make a case that because you see how Green Bay's offense has kind of shrunk this year, right? Mm-hmm. And what's the biggest difference? Number 17, right? He's with the Raiders now, and he's still putting up ridiculous stats. Although he seems frustrated, he's slamming his helmet and pushing the videographer or whatever because he's 1-4. He's never been that, but he's a pretty valuable guy. And you look at like the most valuable player that a team lost is Davante Adams, right? Because you put him on Green Bay right now, they're probably 4-1 at worst, maybe 5-0, and certainly a favorite to maybe get to the Super Bowl. You take them off that team, and they're going to struggle this year.
You know, John, I don't often like to talk about when I was right. I think I'm a very
You've been right so far.
I think I'm a very humble person, but
I wouldn't say that, but.
Quiet you.
Okay.
I got the mute button right here. Yeah, I was going to say, I can mute you.
Payday's coming up. I'll be nice.
Right. Exactly. But, and this was something I've been just talking about at a very appropriate level since the summer and really since Davante Adams went to Las Vegas, and that is how do the Packers replace 3,000 yards and 29 touchdowns over the last two seasons? And
you don't.
You don't. And no one expected them to go 1-for-1 and go find a replacement. But I felt like even what they did do wasn't enough. And we often compared them to Kansas City, and I think Kansas City did more to kind of fill the gaps for Tyreek Hill. I mean, they have their own deficiencies without Tyreek Hill that they're working through. So it wasn't perfect for them either. But I just felt like Green Bay just completely swung and missed on finding any sort of adequate replacement for Davante Adams or B, at least finding an adequate replacement for his skill set and production, because we're seeing right now, again, whether it's an age thing or a confidence thing or a lack of confidence in some of the young guys, Aaron Rodgers can't throw the ball deep. And I'm not saying he physically can't. I'm saying like the consistency, that's just not there right now. And I don't see how they fix it, because again, we're seeing a lot of just kind of dysfunction. And again, I'm not going to say it definitively, but maybe age has finally caught up to him. Not everyone's Tom Brady. Again, people have seen him play till 45 and think every quarterback's going to play till 45. And the reality of it is that's not the case. We saw Peyton Manning, and again, there's a reason for it. His neck injury was obviously the catalyst for him kind of falling off. But I think that also masks that, look, he was 39 years old. like I'm almost 36 and I'm sore. You know what I mean? I don't play football. So this is normal. So I don't know. I mean, I don't want to overreact. I don't want to sit here and do exactly what people did for Brady for years, and something I've always combated against. But I have seen some things that I didn't see with Brady, and that is physically not looking comfortable. And I think that could be a long-term issue.
I think it's a lack of trust, obviously, with the receivers that he does have. So that's an issue. But he has trust issues with everyone off the field as well. Fiancés that are no longer fiancés, family members. This is who he is. You think he's going to trust a rookie wide receiver who's 16 years younger than he is? I mean, Romeo Doubs looks like he can play, right? I think Christian Watson can also play, but he may be permanently scarred from dropping the first pass of the season, which would have been a 75-yard touchdown that would have evened that game against Minnesota. Those guys are going to have to be brought along. They're young. He's still looking for Randall Cobb, who's I think older than Brady at this point. Alan Lazard's nice. And Sammy Watkins, what a waste. We both agreed with that. Yeah. We knew he'd get Julio Jones with Tampa and Sammy Watkins with Green Bay. Surprised, they're hurt. So I don't know. Is OBJ going to go to Green Bay? Probably not. There are other receivers. Kenny Golladay probably gets moved by the Giants. I don't know if the Patriots at some point move one of their wide receivers because they're pretty deep at that position. So maybe they add someone there. But it is up to the quarterback to try to get these guys to play better. You could tell on his deep ball, and I think he still throws the ball fine. Yeah. It's just there's a lack of trust there and there's a lack of timing. Again, he had this incredible chemistry with Davante Adams. Not only, is both of these guys top flight future Hall of Famers, whatever. They're great at what they do, but they also had that great chemistry together, right? So that's tough to duplicate.
We saw Davante Adams catch that long touchdown pass from Derek Carr, and you're telling me that Aaron Rodgers and he couldn't still do that right now, and how valuable that could be on this team. So,
that guy is a beast. I mean, I'm watching Monday night. He just looks different than every other wide receiver too, doesn't he? Like first of all, he's an impeccable route runner. He's also much bigger than you think. He's ferocious out there. Like when the ball goes up, it's his. It's not the cornerback. I mean, talk about 50-50 balls. That guy, I think he's the best receiver in football. I mean, Cooper Kupp obviously putting up ridiculous numbers, but Davante is just, man, that guy he almost looks like LeBron James out there. Like he's just bigger and stronger and faster than everyone. He's just running by people. Yeah. And I'm sure he's saying the former quarterback I had was better, but he wanted to go to play with his friend. And who the hell would want to live in Vegas over Green Bay, especially in December where you can go to work in shorts and a T-shirt rather than a parka?
And look, let's face it, maybe the long term, Davante Adams is still a relatively young guy. The long term outlook in Green Bay or in Las Vegas might actually be better than Green Bay because, I mean, would you be surprised if this was it for Aaron Rodgers after this year? Probably not. I wouldn't be surprised.
No, nothing surprising me with him. He could, Lord knows what he's up to next. I mean, he wants to host Jeopardy. That seems to be his lifelong career ambition. So
we'll see. We'll see what happens. All right. Well, we're gonna get wrapped up here in just a minute. I do want to ask you real quick though, in just a couple minutes. I don't want to spend too much time on this, just because we got an agenda. We got things to do here. Obviously, Travis Kelce, big game on Monday night, 4 touchdowns. That is his 9th multi-touchdown game in his career. That is obviously a little well off the record. 21 from Antonio Gates, 20 from Rob Gronkowski, and another former Chief, 18 from Tony Gonzalez. But The talk of the town has been, and not surprisingly, because it's coming out of Kansas City, that Travis Kelce is the greatest tight end of all time. And again, this is part of the issues that we have with sports debates this year. Like there's a lot of truth to Travis Kelce's greatness, and I think he's well deserving of some very high praise. I'm not gonna go as far as say he's the greatest of all time. I think there's eventually going to be more of a discussion about the distinction from styles in tight ends, because it's very, very distinct. I mean, we're seeing more tight ends nowadays that are obviously bigger wide receivers, essentially. Whereas guys like, Rob Gronkowski, maybe a last of a dying breed, so to speak, blocking, receiving, doing all that stuff at an elite level, not just doing it successfully, but doing it at an elite level. I get the excitement around Travis Kelce and what he does and the advantage, obviously, that he creates on the football field. And I think best tight end, because that's what he is a tight end in the league right now. I don't know if I'm going to go as far as kind of heap the type of greatest of all time, because I don't even know if he's the greatest Kansas City Chiefs tight end of all time. And
he's not.
And
he's not.
Yeah. So there's got to be a way. So when I say these things, it makes me sound like a Travis Kelce hater, and I'm not doing that, because I think there's an appropriate discussion to be had of his overall rank and his success as a wide receiver. But again, if you're going to sit there and tell me, okay, which tight end is better, Rob Gronkowski or Travis Kelce, I'm going to, without hesitation, say Rob Gronkowski. So,
yeah, I think teams really had a game plan for Gronkowski. And again, also factor that he was a superb blocker. I mean, Travis Kelce is not blocking anybody. He, again, is a jumbo-sized wide receiver. And look, he's unguardable.
Would go up against your best defensive line, not just
Sure.
a third or fourth linebacker or a cornerback. You're talking about you would bring Rob Gronkowski in to block against extra help against Aaron Donald. Sure. That's the type of player blocker he was. So he wasn't just to your point, he was a superb. And if you can find a more complimentary word or adjective, I'd be more than willing to use it.
Exquisite, which you don't normally hear on the football field,
it.
But I'm a different level, Ian, so I'm going to go with exquisite.
Of course you are.
Just call me Johnny Thesaurus.
Right.
As far as that, I still think Tony Gonzalez is the greatest tight end ever. Just the numbers are incredible. He missed one game. He was a good, not a great blocker. I also factor in who was throwing him the football. Mm-hmm. I mean, he didn't really have elite quarterbacks in Kansas City. He had Matt Ryan in Atlanta, who's, very good. But when we talk about Gronkowski, who threw the ball to him was Tom Brady. Shannon Sharpe, who I think is an all-time great tight end, had John Elway throwing him the ball. And now we see that Kelce has Patrick Mahomes. So they had that type of advantage over, say, Tony Gonzalez. But in terms of the total package, yeah, Gronk's the greatest tight end ever. Look, Shannon Sharpe, who's, I think, a top 5-6 tight end ever, he's in the Hall of Fame, has said Rob Gronkowski is the greatest tight end ever. So when someone who's in the argument picks another guy that's in that argument as the greatest ever, you kind of have to take that seriously. Kelce's outstanding. He's phenomenal, especially in the red zone. But look, the 2 years before Patrick Mahomes showed up, he still was really good. He had 1,125 yards receiving in 2016, 1,038 yards receiving in 2017. So he was already a Pro Bowl caliber tight end in those 2 years. Mahomes comes, and it kind of elevates a little bit, right? Obviously, you get a better quarterback than Alex Smith, but it's not like he was a stiff before Patrick Mahomes showed up. And also, he is playing for, I think, the best play designer and play caller since Bill Walsh or Joe Gibbs and Andy Reid. I mean, he just has a way of getting guys open, which is what a great coach does. So there's that factor as well. Not that Gronkowski wasn't playing for a great coach himself, but I always put Tony Gonzalez number one. But in terms of the total package, if he had been healthier, Gronkowski would be the greatest tight end ever. And I think a lot of those other great tight ends think so. And there's always one guy that gets left out for some reason, kind of a poor man's Gronkowski, is Jason Witten, because he was a phenomenal blocker as well, and he put up some serious numbers, but kind of a poor man's Gronkowski.
Well, and excuse me, obviously we're not even touching on the Ditkas of the world and some of the old school tight end who, again, based on the idea of the position, have just just as much argument as any of these flashy offensive-minded guys, too. And to your point about Andy Reid, I mean, what a perfect era of football for him. Like, obviously, he's been around the league for a long time, but I mean, this openness in how the game is played now, and the kind of favoritism towards offense when it comes to officiating, and not like, obviously within the rules is what I'm saying, because as we all know, as Fox Sports analyst or rules analyst Mike Pereira reaffirmed to me that I was right. See, I told you I don't often mention it, but I guess today I've mentioned it twice. He did say I was.
And you're
right.
humble. And
I'm
you're
very humble.
well.
I'm very humble. I don't have T-shirts being made up as we speak. That
Isn't
says,
he a
Ian
great
was
guest,
right.
though?
Oh,
what a great
awesome.
guest!
Awesome.
Oh,
well,
he's the best.
especially when he says, and I quote, "Ian, you are right."
Wow.
I mean, that's just.
He had you at Ian.
Yeah.
He didn't have to go beyond that. He remembered your name.
Had me at "you are right," because I've heard a lot of awful things after Ian before. So I wasn't necessarily ready to accept whatever came at that point. But he was right, or I was right, in saying that specific players, obviously do not get preferential treatment. Specifically Brady, because the numbers just don't exist. But the offense and the protection of players in general do. So what does that naturally do? Well, it opens up the offense because there are more protections for these offensive players. So there's less things the defense can do. And then, of course, the way the rules are played opens up these offenses. So a guy like Andy Reid is just he's just having a field day out there. And, look, I think that Travis Kelce is great. I mean, no one's saying it, but this kind of goes back to the first conversation we had, or at least maybe one. I think we had this one off the air a little bit, but it was about this habit of Chiefs fans, some, not all, just some of them, to everything has to be the greatest of all time. And it kind of really takes us away from how we can actually really appreciate what we're watching, because I'm sitting there watching Travis Kelce, and in my mind, I'm like, oh my God. Or it's like, this happens more so with Mahomes. And it's like, okay, something happens, and you just know that the reaction is going to be way over the top. And it's like, I'm going to sit there and not even enjoy being able to see what I'm watching. You know what I mean? It's just going to be like, all right, let's react reasonably. And then I get on and I see a very unreasonable reaction from everyone, and just kind of takes away what we're seeing. And it's kind of what's happening a little bit with Kelce here. It's like, I think 4 touchdowns in a single game, obviously you say that, and I think, well, Al Bundy, of course. Paul Kai's greatest and best athlete of all time. But, mostly I think, wow, that's an incredible feat, incredible accomplishment, however you slice it up. But, like, don't sit there and tell me, well, this is why he's the greatest of all time. Well, no, it's not, because other players have done that. Other players have had successful offensive outputs as tight ends, and other players have done more at the tight end position. So don't force me to be the bad guy here, John, is what I'm saying. Don't force me to have to talk down someone else's accomplishments because you're elevating them beyond what they should be. So
I will introduce you to Kellen Winslow Sr., who for the longest time I thought was the greatest tight end ever. He's the tight end I think that changed the position more than any. He's 6'6", 245 pounds, could have played wide receiver, was not a real elite blocker, but put up ridiculous numbers. He and Dan Fouts together was a combination that we had never really seen before. In fact, Dan Fouts has said that without Kellen Winslow Sr., he's not in the Hall of Fame, and both guys are in the Hall of Fame. So, I mean, I think he was the first one like that. Yeah, there's like 7 or 8 great tight ends. There's no question. But to just take one guy and say, well, he's just better than everybody else is kind of tough at that position, because it's dependent on who's throwing you the football, the era you're in as well. So, but this is the way we live. I mean, I can't wait till Sunday to watch Allen and Mahomes go at each other, because I think it's going to be wildly entertaining.
I'm going to have to watch the game on mute.
Well, you may have to, because everybody's going to be saying, we've never seen this before. Well, whatever Mahomes does, Brett Favre did, and whatever Josh Allen does, John Elway did, and that was, 25, 30 years ago. I saw it. Those guys were, they were freaks in their day. And that's one thing I'll say about Troy Aikman. Of all the lead analysts, he's the one guy that doesn't go nuts, right? I mean, like, he'll say, oh, that was a really nice play by Patrick Mahomes.
Well,
he read the defense.
That's part of the animosity that Chiefs fans had towards him, because he wasn't falling over backwards for,
Right.
basically kissing the
Collinsworth's
ass.
the worst, right?
Oh, he's
Collinsworth's
awful.
the worst. I mean, he's just
it just makes me so sick. Like
he loves obviously Rodgers as well, and Aikman likes Rodgers as well. But Aikman also was an elite quarterback, so I mean, he would sound foolish. He'd be gushing over these guys. Romo, I'm not quite sure what he does half the time. I sometimes don't even understand what he's saying, but you know, there's a lot of oohs and ahs and sounds of like he's passing a kidney stone. So but he's doing Sunday's game, and they're gonna have to reel him in at some point because he's gonna be going, Jim, I can't believe this pass. You know, you should believe the pass because you know who Tony Romo's idol was growing up? Brett Favre. I mean, Brett Favre was before Patrick Mahomes, the same basic quarterback. Mahomes is winning more and takes care of the ball a little better than Favre does, not a lot better. And you know, I went on my rant.
No, you're right. And again, these are the rants that I enjoy because whatever we can do to keep the reality of the fact that football existed before 2018, folks.
Right.
It really did. I swear to God, don't take my word for it. Just, you know.
But this is what I face because I grew up a huge Patriots fan. Mm-hmm. And the first 3 Super Bowls I loved. But then it got kind of ridiculous with Patriot fans. And so many of them apparently started following the team in 2001. Mm-hmm. So I was like, you know, I'm the guy that was crying.
At least
when
they won 3 Super Bowls, though. You know what I mean?
That's
like
true, too. Yeah, no, it's true.
The Chiefs are acting they're like, we're the new Patriots. It's like, wait a minute. No, you're not.
No, there's no new Patriots. Because as I've said, Brady has 7 Super Bowls. The rest of the league, the rest of the quarterbacks in the league have won 6. Yeah. So, you know, let's stop the nonsense. But I'm the guy that in 1976 cried for days and still haven't gotten over the fact that the Patriots lost to the Raiders in the AFC divisional round 24-21, a game I think the Patriots got stolen from them. Maybe it was made back to them in 2001, but I cried like a baby. I was 13 years old. So I was with them when they were going, you know, 5-9. And, you know, that was a good season actually back in the early 70s. Mm-hmm. But so I kind of pushed back a little bit, like, oh, look at this. This is, you know, the way it's always been done. And also you got to factor in that from the time Montana retired in 94 till Mahomes' first playoff win, the Chiefs never won a playoff game between 94 and 2018. So that's, 24 years? And they were pretty good. I mean, it wasn't like they were bad teams. They would make the playoffs, and then they lost. Yeah, I mean, they had, you know, Derek Thomas is in the Hall of Fame. You got Tony Gonzalez. They had Priest Holmes. You know, you had Schottenheimer and Dick Vermeil, or both. You know, Vermeil's in the Hall of Fame now, right? And Schottenheimer may get there at some point. I mean, they were good. But they never win a playoff game somehow. So now, obviously, they're failing themselves because they are a team that gets to the AFC Championship game every year. And like, what the hell else is going on in Kansas City? The Royals had a good 2-year run in 2014 and 2015. They don't have a hockey team or a basketball team, so this is it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they hate St. Louis too, so they wouldn't.
That's the other thing, the rivalry with St. Louis. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I mean,
so
the Cardinals
you can't really be a Blues fan if you want to jump on hockey. I know some of our Kansas City folk are some Avs fans out there because proximity, I believe, is fairly close.
The most accomplished franchise in that state is the St. Louis Cardinals. It's not even close. They've got 11 World Series titles, which is second to only the Yankees. So yeah, so within their state, they feel like second fiddle.
Yeah, well, we'll see. Well, like I said, a lot's going to hinge on that game this Sunday. I'm sure we'll have more clarity with all these debates as the greatest of all time goes up against the greatest of all time, and the greatest tight end of all time goes up against the greatest. I don't know. I'm just sick of it. But
strong safety, Mika Hyde. Mika Hyde or
right.
Poirier, one of those guys. Yeah,
right.
it'll be tandem ever.
I'm looking forward to the game. It's going to be entertaining. Like I said, we'll have to watch it on mute, especially now knowing that Tony Romo is going to be broadcasting it.
Yeah.
That's it for us here today. We're going to say goodbye. We will be back tomorrow. We'll give our full slate of picks for Sunday's action and of course Monday. So thank you very much, everyone, and we will talk to you soon.